Hi, this is Justin. Uh, this is week 2 of my custom game engine features, and I'm just gonna quickly showcase what my current game state looks like before before going on a deeper dive on what I programmed this week. So first, I'm running the server executable. You can see there's like a tick system. I currently set it like every five ticks per second, which is pretty slow, but you'll see later why I want it that way. Um, and here on this separate PowerShell, I can run the client, and you can see that if I try to move anything on the server, it doesn't really care about what input you give it because it's just trying to authenticate the inputs. But if I input it inside the server, then it'll start to move. And you see there's like a really big lag here, and that's just because I set up the server in the way that I wanted to. Um, Hold on, let me just finish showcasing more. Right, and you can see this lag here because I wanted to set up my server in a way that authentically captures like the multiplayer network experience. Um, and I wanted to really like my goal was to create netcode such that even in bad lag situations, uh, the server kind of predicts is able to predict where or like interpolate slash replicate what the client where the client should be based on your past inputs. So I didn't have time to do that this week, but I set up the basis for I set up the basis of like a pretty pretty authentic um, like server experience, uh, so that I could achieve my goal in the future. So this week I worked on a couple of new features. The first one is when you launch into the game, you send like this connection, basically like this like um, ACK request like handshake, such so that like this client will let the server know that hey, I want to join. Can you assign a client ID for me in the server such that there can be potentially more than one client in the future, and then the server will then respond and give like a valid answer and allow the ports. So and this is done. This is done through like a lobby system. So in the server, there's a lobby struct such that every time the player sends like a certain string with like a certain command, then it will do the command. So it's like I think it's connect where where you can where it adds the player inside, and if it fails to connect, then so this is where you connect, and I also made it so that if the server at any point fails to send the client data packets, then it will disconnect the player and make it so that we don't ever send it messages again in the future. Because if you think about like all the different if there's like 10 players, if a player disconnects in the middle of the game, then you shouldn't broadcast it to that player because you're just wasting CPU at that point. Um, I also so all of this is done using the Boost ACO, the Boost library, specifically the threads and the socket network sockets. And this I didn't use any middleware because I wanted to really um, like learn like how to like make make a multi-threaded and also a networked game with sockets. So 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 the client so like the client and server has like the main thread that it does most of its CPU like game rendering from, but they also have like separate threads for listening and sending requests to each other, and this allows us to like not stall and like freeze the game as much. Uh, there's some setup walking through. So walking through here's like setting up the sockets when you construct it. Um, game. So these one interesting thing to note is that these client and server, I programmed it so that they were overrides of the engine, so they do slightly different functionalities, or the client does slightly different functionality based on um, based on uh, like for the inputs. For example, the server cannot do any inputs while the client can, but the client doesn't actually render the inputs themselves. I set up so that the client will have to receive so I set it up such that I think it's called pool input. Yeah. So the client, every time I press a button down, the client will pool its input into an SDL2 event and into like a vector, and then they'll then send that vector of that inputs to the server, in which the server would then sort of validate that request. Like yeah. So when it receives the input message, it's gonna parse that string into the event types and event key codes and the event states, and then it will validate the client input, like run it in the engine and see if it actually can move to that position, and then it'll return a validated position from the server back to the client, uh, which is which the client then uses, uh, which the client then uses to process their own location. And one issue I ran into was that floats are really evil. So like, even though I'll be passing in like a float, when you convert it to a string, it would try to like get rid of some like very small minute differences. So it's one of the reasons why you can't never directly compare strings together, because it's always guaranteed to be not the same. So it gets like a little bit inaccurate, but it was good for the most part. And I couldn't get to replicating the server, just like getting to like interpolate the client this week, because you see how it was like so laggy. I kind of wanted it to be like that so that I could use the previous and past positions of the client in like a circular buffer, and basically like smooth out the jumps. And I wanted to like program my own prediction netcode for that. But I didn't get around to it, which is a little bit of a shame, because uh, I guess just reworking all these networking stuff took a long time. Um, but yeah, that is basically it for what I did this week. I skimmed over a lot of new features I think I added. One thing is I was you can now send messages to client, uh, or just to get player data. So this is the function that gets like the transform component of a player. Um, and in the future, I'm thinking of having like completely networked Lua components, which basically like continuously updates their position and sends it to all and broadcasts it to all players. But I could not I didn't have time to get it out finish that this week. Um, I guess I researched a lot about how to set up these systems and what I wanted to and what systems do I want to implement, and I found that this this resource is actually a really good one. It's made by this pretty cracked network programmer, and it basically goes through all like the different types of server setups that people can use. And I think it's a good resource if you want to continue researching about how to program these network uh, layers. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching.